Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant that he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outbursts.
Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of order in this country,
Give us free.
Peace, unity, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and friends. This is the all-new Black Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut. Without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chuck you with liberated truth. I am your host and your native soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to enlighten, inform, and engage. And I want to engage with all who claim to know the truth. All truth seekers and my native family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our indigenous native ancestors and to all those who've carried the mantle of truth, and to every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence, no matter where that direction may lead you. My main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the Black Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal goddess and mother of all living here and above.
AC in the house.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. You never find a white aborigine. Rather, aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American.
You go to a reservation, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. When you go to any hood, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. So what make you think you're not on a reservation? Right? So all these achievements that we ascribe to African Americans, these are achievements by Native Americans who had to take on the identity of being African American because they was hanging us.
This means, in the case of an American Negro, it comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were you, that the Indians...
But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over. But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over, want to take his shit over.
Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us.
Freedom, 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 freedom. This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure. Freedom, 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 freedom. This is how we ride and roll.
Hey, this is JC, aka Afro Black, and I am here with ya for another delicious Black Sunday to drop nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. And I am here. I am happy to be here. I've been gone for a couple weeks, doing some research, doing some studying, not only for myself, but to share with the indigenous conscious community. You feel me? feels good to know who you are. Feels good to know that I am where I belong. I am where I'm supposed to be, here in North America, where my indigenous ancestors originated. You feel me? Right here, my ancestors, my tribe, the Cherokee, the Choctaw. You feel me? So, to all my indigenous people out there, if you're listening, if you're joining me today, if you plan on just tuning in, Yakoki to all my indigenous brothers and sisters out there, you feel me? And so today's podcast topic is going to be an enjoyable one, you feel me? I got some information I want to share, I got some audio casts I want to share, and in particular, I want to focus on a few subjects that I want to share with the conscious community concerning the genocide of our people. So on that note, let me tell you today's podcast topic is, and I quote, the European invasion and the transatlantic slave myth. Again, the European invasion and the transatlantic slave myth. Subtitled, Plymouth Rock landed on us. Again, subtitle, Plymouth Rock landed on us. And I'm not sure who know what or how many people know what, because I'm not sure who's listening in on the podcast, what you know about Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower and the so-called first European contact with our indigenous ancestors, which it was not the first. So let me change up my music and give us something a little bit more laid back too, you feel me, as we verberate on this information that I want to disseminate to my conscious indigenous community. So let me play this here. Here we go. Right. There you go. A Tribe Called Red. So there we go. I'm going to lay that in the backdrop right there. As I said, let me break down what I want to talk about today, what I want to share on the terrible past of our ancestors and their contact with Europeans. As the title is said, the European invasion. And when you hear that, you're thinking I'm going to talk about the war. And I am going to talk about war. I'm going to talk about the different aspects of war. You feel me? Most people, when they think about the war over this country and the land war that went on as Europeans were expanding their colonies and expanding, their our land into our land, on our land. You feel me? They think about the guns and the bows and the arrows and the knifing and the back and forth, the physical altercation of war. But most people don't focus on the real aspect of the European invasion, which is the biological war, the paper genocide war. So I want to talk about the different aspects of war. You're going to realize biological warfare is war. Paper genocide is a form of war, erasing one's identity. I'm not sure how many people out there have seen, I believe it's called The Net. I believe Will Smith played in it. I think it was called The Net, which is where, his identity was being changed and his identity was being erased and he was on a run. So my point being that, when you live within a system where identity, ID, numbers, social security, all this stuff confirms who you are so you can operate within that system, this is the reason why these devils created the system the way they did, and this is the reason why they made the treaties the way they did. This is the reason why they created reservations. This is the reason why they created the 1870 Naturalization Act. This is the reason why they created the Dawes List and all these games and political legalities that they created and hurdles that they created to subjugate our people. They did this. So let me go into the subject matter. All right, I want to break down a few things as I was doing my research over the weekend, and I want to focus on some subject matters that I think that are real important, that if you want to see what I'm going to try to convey to you, which is not only identifying us as a people indigenous to North America, those who are Black Americans or AKA artificial construct African Americans, you have to understand the past. You have to understand the history. You have to understand the process. You have to understand the legalities, and you have to understand the way the white man operated back then and how he still operates today, even though there's been an evolution or an illusion of an evolution of change. So let me break this down. 3 main goals and reasons for Europeans who invaded Turtle Island. Okay, the first, slave labor. Get that in your head, people. You got to realize why the white man came over here. He came over here looking for slave labor. If you think the white man came over here and it's like, oh, we didn't know there was any people here, you're fooling yourself. Do your research. The first people who explored over here in North America was people like Hernando de Soto, Hernando Pisco, Giovanni Verrazzano, and there were others as well. Matter of fact, that's just talking about Europeans, okay? We're not even talking about folks who were friendly, who came over here first and even cohabitated, which were, West Africans. But we're just talking about the European invasion. So their first goals. Their goals and their reasons for coming over here and invading, their first goals, it was slave labor for economic wealth and capital through forced labor. Second, the resources that being gold, silver, and all its natural resources for personal and economic gain. Again, the second reason why they came here, looking for resources, gold, silver, and all natural resources for personal economic gain. The third, the land and the good soil that was here. You gotta realize, if you just do research, the soil in Europe was not very good at the time when they came over here. They had problems with their crops. They had problems feeding their people. Their people were growing and they didn't have enough to even feed their people. On top of that, we're not even talking about the system of oppression that they were under, that they were trying to run from. But that was not their main reason for coming over here, because they were running from anything. They were looking for something. So the third reason, they were looking for land to claim as their own for their progeny and future progeny. So those are the 3 main reasons why Europeans came over here. Okay? So we must understand these things first when you're going into trying to understand or comprehend the past. You have to understand that these people never planned on cohabitating with indigenous people. You must comprehend that these people never planned on cohabitating with indigenous people at first. So the grand scheme of European colonization started out with the falsity of political diplomacy. In other words, the political manipulation and deception by these first diplomatic so-called tactics of friendship. Did you hear me, people? Okay, the grand scheme started when they came over here. If anybody's out there listening to this podcast, if you know about the Mayflower history of the Massachusetts and New England Indians and their contact with the so-called Pilgrims in the beginning, they come across in the story as if they were diplomatic and friendly. That's how the story is presented, people. It's presented under a diplomacy of friendship. But the whole time behind the scenes, there was an ulterior motive and agenda to deceive the New England, Massachusetts Indians. There was a motive, people. Just read the original story. Get the balanced story. Go get some college text history books and you will see. Go get Brown's Universities. There's a study that was done on the history of indigenous enslavement that was done by Brown's University. Go check it out. Okay? So, waiting for any reason, let me say this also. As these Europeans came over here and colonized, in the guise and in the deceitful delusion of friendship and diplomacy, they were actually literally waiting for a reason to show and to express white male domination through warfare and by any means necessary, through military might. which entails biological warfare. And that's what leads to me to want to talk about, like I said, the different forms of genocide, the different types of warfare, which includes a form of genocide. Most people don't even pay attention to the fact that when it comes to war, in most cases, war entails a form of genocide. Why? But it doesn't mean you don't have to kill the people to create genocide. You change the scenery, you change the culture, you change the system in which these people were living in, from indigenous people living on the land in unison with the culture, in unison with the land itself and with the animals and with the plant life, and you change all that. You alter that. You assimilate those people. That is a form of genocide. So then the question stands this: why wasn't? If somebody's wondering, why are you saying that they used biological warfare? Why are you talking about these different forms of genocide? Well, you have to understand the history. And if you don't understand the history, you're not going to comprehend the process of how things evolved to the way they are today when it comes to the lost identity of black people. This is why I got the part on the title on the podcast topic where it says the invasion of the European invasion and the transatlantic slave myth, because I question that whole transatlantic so-called myth. That's all questionable. And that's the thing, black people, we have to question. If you just accept things for verbatim, if you just accept things for the way they are, then you are a slave. You'll never get a true answer to a question unless you first ask, unless you first seek and look. So, if most, as they tell us in a lot of these history books, and as my kids have learned, in the public school system, thank the great mother, spirit mother, that I teach my children at home, even though they go to public schools. But if you believe the narrative that these Europeans have taught us, you would think that, okay, the Indians died from war and from disease. From war and from disease. Both were situations that they initiated, that they caused. But the question is, did they die off in masses? Did they die off in masses to the degree that, for the most part, they're not here or they don't exist? And the question is also, was there any real transatlantic slave trade? And was there a need to bring Africans over here? Was it necessary? Because I've read, and I'm pretty sure you've read, I've heard, and I'm pretty sure you've heard, my children have heard, so I'm pretty sure you have heard that these white devils are continuing the agenda and false narrative that they brought Africans over here because Indians had died in large numbers from disease and warfare and they needed labor. I want you to know that's a lie. That is a false, big ass a white lie that these white devils continue to tell. Native Americans, and I'm not talking about specifically to Native Americans, because when it comes to the Native American people, the white folks play the game. What you don't know, you don't know. We're biological computers, people, and so what you don't know, you can't process, and what you can't process, you can't figure out. So you are caught in the game of politics when it comes to indigenous or Native American history or identity, for that fact. Just like the construct and the false construct of the African American label that they've given us, which have evolved to that. What cracking me up is that because a lot of the young people today, this young generation today, which is not really close to the older generation. Years ago when I was a kid growing up, I had a closeness to my grandmother. I'm 50 years old. I had a closeness to my grandmother. I was so close to my grandmother that when my mother moved away from the vicinity of my grandmother, I used to catch the bus to go over to my grandmother's house, and I was just 11 years old. The first time I learned how to catch the bus system. I wanted to go to my grandma's house because my grandma cooked, and her house always smelled like collard greens and squash and cornbread and neck bones and No, my grandma didn't eat a whole lot of pork, so you didn't hear all that. She mostly ate neck bones, squash and greens, and black-eyed peas. And I just wanted to be around my grandma because I love my grandma. Even though she was mean, I had a love-hate relationship with her. Not a hate, literally. I'm just figuratively speaking. I used to think my grandma was mean sometimes, but she also had a huge sweet side to her. You feel me? My point being is that as a result of the fact that this generation today is not close to their parents and grandparents, this is the reason why a lot of our family values, and when I say family value, oral traditions has not been passed down. So a lot of young people are not privy to our true identity. So the system is teaching our children and giving our kids this false artificial construct of a label and identity, which is to literally make us immigrants in our own country. Literally make us immigrants. Huh? By you accepting the false construct. That's a part of the European invasion. Don't get it twisted, people. The war has changed to a degree with the Native American. I say it to a degree. And when I say Native American, let me correct myself on that. Indigenous Aboriginal people. The war has evolved. I'm pretty sure back during the early 1800s and the 1700s, I know for a fact due to my research that the war was more physical back then. It went from physical slavery bondage to the paper game and political game of relocating the people around the country like a chess pieces on a chessboard, to creating the political game of saying that they need to be citizens, to creating a false construct of an identity of African American. Now you might say, well, they didn't call us African Americans back in the early 1900s. No, they didn't. Not on a wide scale, and it was not something that was done, on an everyday, far as normality with the people on the, far as the everyday people, normal people. But as far as politically, far as the federal government, by 1870, they had the Naturalization Act where you had to jump through this hoop if you wanted to be a citizen. And a part of jumping through that hoop was calling yourself, summing yourself up, grouping yourself up with Africans. This was their game the whole time. This was their plan the whole time. So let me go back to my main point. Going back to defining genocide. This is what I'm saying. See, under genocide, you need to realize genocide doesn't mean it. When it was coined by, I believe his name, Raphael Lemkin, in the early 1900s, a Jew, Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide. When he coined that term, the original definition means to change a person's culture and identity, to assimilate that individual, to change that person's total awareness of who they are and recreate them, and from the aspect of Western ideology, to take that individual from their natural environment, from their natural cultural environment, and to westernize them. That is called cultural genocide. Cultural genocide. And that is what has happened to the indigenous Aboriginal Amerindian, our ancestors, which has led up to us to this day. So long. Let me get down to some, audio casts. I can get down preaching, and I got a whole lot of information right here, people. I got a whole lot of information that I want to share with you. And in the process, so let me tell you something, Brother Lord Jamal of Brand Nubian. Tell me, brother.
In order to make us not rebel crazily, they made us think we was from somewhere else. We was already here. That we are the fucking Indians. And in order to make us not rebel crazily, they made us think we was from somewhere else.
That happened, people. That happened. Wake up. You feel me? Wake up.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. You never find a white aborigine. Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines. But you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American.
That's what happened, people. That's what happened, people. Now, I'm pretty sure you got people out there right now saying, you playing that, and I've heard Malcolm X call us Africans, saying that we were brought over here. You got to realize, this was back in the 1960s. How much information you think Malcolm X was privy to? Huh? But he still knew something, and when he came back from Mecca, he learned even more about who he was, because he came back with a different perspective when he came back from Mecca. How much information you think Malcolm X was actually privy to? And he was an intelligent man who knew a lot, but how much you think he was privy to back in the 1960s? I'm gonna tell you this: he knew something for him to call us Aborigines. Go look up the word Aborigine. That word is not stationary to Australia. That is a word for people who are of indigenous, the original people. That's what the word Aborigine means. So, before I go on, and I'm going to continue on my subject matter of, because I get to jumping around all over the place, of genocide, the different forms of war. The different forms of war. That's what I'm going to talk about. That's what this is all about when I talk about the European invasion. The European invasion did not just entail war, as far as physical war, shooting and stabbing and pushing the people back off their land through military force. That was not the only form of war these Europeans used. They used also biological warfare. They used the paper genocide of warfare. Matter of fact, let me break it down to you right here. Okay, my notes. Okay, the first, we must comprehend and be mindful that there were 3 to 4, there were 4 types of forms of warfare in the beginning and during the European invasion. The first type of warfare being the fictitious diplomacy in the form of friendship, when their true intentions was to take over by any means necessary, and if that meant war. But the first war was their the contact and encounter with Europeans. Okay, and when they did this, what did it do? Just their first so-called contact, they ended up in a war of pre-modern biological germ infectious disease warfare against indigenous Native American peoples. Do you feel me, people? They did this. If you think that the white man, he was just a carrier of disease, and that's how it happened. No, it was not intentional. He wasn't trying to intentionally, kill the Indians by contact. No, yes, he did. The white devils knew what they were doing. That was intentional. Those contact with indigenous people, where hundreds of indigenous people got sick and died from contact with the white man, that was pre-planned, that was pre-organized, that was strategic, that was warfare, people. That was warfare. And you know what? I can prove my point right here. Matter of fact, I got an article right here that I want to read. Okay, the article says, in the 18th century, the British fought France and its Indian allies for possession of in the 18th century, the British fought. If somebody's in the conference room, ain't going over here to the conference room. I think I hear somebody. Someone in the conference room right there. You want to share something? You got something you want to comment on? Something you want to say?
No.
Excuse me?
No, I was just learning.
Okay.
I'm just learning.
Okay, well, let me before I continue reading, this is the Black Village Community Podcast. You can always chime in. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time. You can chime in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 232 857-232 0155. And don't forget the conference code, which is 947-595 here at the Black Village Community Podcast. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time. And so let me continue. If you I'm gonna mute you for a few seconds, for a minute, as I do this reading, whoever's sitting here in the conference room, and then I'll unchime you when I'm done reading. Okay, so back to what I want to point out. When it comes to warfare, the Europeans have always known about germ warfare. So what they did to the indigenous people was intentional. Let me prove my point. Here is an excerpt from a history book. Let me read it to you right quick. It says, in the 18th century, the British fought France and its Indian allies for possession of what was to become Canada during the French and Indian War of 1753 to 1763. At the time of the Pontiac Rebellion in 1763, Sir Geoffrey Amherst, the commander-in-chief of the British forces of North America, wrote to Colonel Henry Beauquet. Could it, and I quote him. I'm quoting Geoffrey Amherst, who was sending this letter to his senior officer, and I quote: "Could it not be contrived to send smallpox among these disinfected tribes of Indians? We must use every stratagem in our power to reduce them." The colonel replied, "I will try to inoculate the Native American tribes with some blankets that may fall into their hands, and take care not to get the disease myself." Smallpox decimated the Native Americans who had never been exposed to the disease before and had no immunity. Now look, come on now. There you go. That's evidence right there. Anybody who don't know this, you can just go look up the war that the British had with the French over Canada in 1754 to 1763. Anybody can find it. I found it. Proof right there. They were doing biological warfare. All this crap that these devils be playing on the History Channel and all that stuff when they want to talk about, what the Greeks were doing. Yeah, the Greeks did biological warfare. I got that history sitting right here. They did it too. No, white people been doing that stuff for years. At any means necessary, they hurt who they consider their enemy. And the indigenous people were not their enemy. They created enemies, and they created the term enemy with the indigenous people by attacking the indigenous people, by taking their food, by raping their women, by enslaving their children, by killing their men, by taking their land. This is what these white devils have done. This is what they continue to do. This is what you're seeing when you watch about what happened over there in the Lakota with the pipeline. They ain't changed anything. That's a whole nother subject for something else. And so I see a lot of the Mongoloid Indians now wanting to band with us. Well, when I say us, I'm talking about black indigenous people. That's another history lesson, people, I'm going to go into, and that's going to probably be a couple weeks from now. We'll talk about the two different indigenous people who were here in North America. Most people don't know that. Most people think, matter of fact, you know what, let me play some. I'm pretty sure anybody who listens to my show are realizing that my queen is not here. Normally I'm here with my queen. She joins me on the show, and we vibrate together and we have a good time. But you know what? That's okay. I got my queen reading a book. I told everybody weeks ago, because I've been reading from a new book that I just got called the title of this book. Let me hear it. Oh yeah, here he is, right here. The book is "We Are Not Just Africans: The Black Native Americans" by Dr. Clyde Winters. Very good book. Very, very good book. So, talking about Mongoloid Indians, I'm going to play an audio cast. I had my queen to read some excerpts from this book over the weekend, and I recorded it, so, because I knew she might not be here because she's a hard-working indigenous woman. My queen is Cherokee. And yes, my queen's grandmother, she's blessed. She happened to have her grandmother was 100% Cherokee, and she was on the Dawes Rose list. So my queen know who she is. My queen knows she's indigenous. You feel me? And I know my family. My grandmother wasn't on the Dawes Rose list. My family hails from Shreveport, Louisiana. My grandma was Cherokee as well. My grandmother always know who she was. Taught it to me. My mother, so I always know who I am. You feel me? So. But it just had to, not everybody made the Dawes Rose list, and that's another podcast for another time. But let me play this audio cast from this book titled "We Are Not Just Africans: The Black Native Americans" by Dr. Clyde Winters. Now, what I want to play, this audio part that I want to play from the book, which is important, is pointing out, the warfare that went on. Most people think, it happened to all the Indians. And for the most part, Mongoloid Indians, and I say Mongoloid Indians, those who don't know what that term means, Mongoloid, I encourage you to go look it up. But Mongoloid Indians, which are the Siberian Asian white-looking Indians, that's the ones with the white or light-looking, what they call red, but they're not red. But white-looking Indians with the straight hair and broad nose. There were two peoples here, and those Indians that they those Hollywood image Indians that they've painted to us and given to us and fed to us throughout the years are not the original people of North America. The original people of North America are the indigenous Aboriginal people, Paleo-Amerindians of North America. You feel me? And so that's what I want to speak to. That's who they were focusing most of their warfare on. Most of the Europeans' warfare were focused on the matrilineal people, which were the indigenous people. That's the matrilineal, the matrifocal tribes of North America. And that's important to know those very terms that I just mentioned: matrilocal, matrifocal, matrilineal tribes, which were like the tribes like the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Yamasee, the Yuchi, the Ojibwa. You know, a lot of the Plains tribe Indians were patriarchal. They were patrilineal, meaning that chiefdom was only men, headed by men only, chosen by their council of men who chose the chief. But see, matrilineal, matrilocal, matrifocal tribes, the chiefdom was appointed by the elder of clan mothers. You couldn't be a chief unless you was assigned chief by a clan mother, or unless your mother was a clan mother, the council of clan mothers who chose or could pull down or replace a chief. These are the things that are important to know about our history. I want you to know, white men didn't like that. White man didn't like that women chose the chiefs. White man didn't like that a man couldn't be a chief unless he was chosen by a woman. And not only that, a woman could be a chief of the tribe. They didn't like that either. But they gravitated to these patriarchal Mongoloid Indians, and that's who they used and allied themselves with to break down, enslave, and kill our people. And if you don't believe that, I would encourage you to do your research. So let me open up my conference room in case anybody got anything they might want to say. Okay, I got the conference room open. Matter of fact, I'm finna play an audio cast. I'm gonna leave the conference room open. Normally I close it, but since I did a lot of talking and forgot that I had closed it, I'm gonna leave it open. And I'm gonna play this audio cast of my queen reading an excerpt from Dr. Clyde's book titled "We Are Not Just Africans, the Black Native Americans." And so this is just a piece that I got like I think about 3 pieces parts to this. So I'm gonna play one right now, give everybody a chance to check it out, and I will be right back after this clip.
We Are Not Just Africans, the Black Native Americans by Clyde Winters. Chapter 1, Black Native American DNA. To ensure that Black Native Americans would never be able to get their land back, white Americans created the myth that the Native Americans were descendants of Mongoloid people from East Asia. This myth was solidified in the minds of people around the world through the export of American cowboy movies that always depicted Apache and other Mongoloid Indians as the authentic Native Americans or Indians. Henry Louis Gates, Jr. was told by his parents that he was of Native American ancestry, but when he took a DNA test, he discovered he belonged to haplogroup R1. Gates was told that this was a haplogroup of Europeans, so he proudly declared that he was white.
Okay, that's just the first part. The point of playing that little clip right there was to point out that Dr. Clyde spoke about a myth. He spoke about a myth. And what was that myth he pointed out? The myth that he pointed out is that white people created the myth by using movies, using their cowboy stories and books that they write, using their school system and their media outlet. They created the myth that there was only one type of Indian in America, and that's the Native American. And you got to realize that word Native American was given to them for a reason. I don't even know why they took it. Personally, I believe it was maybe a benefit at the same time, like a two-edged sword against us, taking away our identity and taking away our acknowledgement of who we are, as far as people knowing who we are as a people. But at the same time, it didn't help them It didn't help them to ally themselves with Europeans, the Mongoloid Indians. And who are the Mongoloid Indians? You heard the Apache, the Comanche, the Navajo. Now, it doesn't mean that there are not any black Indians within these tribes, because I want you to know, the Mongoloid Indians that crossed over the Bering Strait 12,000 years ago, when they came here to a land that was not barren. They came to a land that was already inhabited with indigenous people. Indigenous black Indians already here when the Siberian Mongoloids came across, who are now called the Native Americans. But mind you, that term and that artificial construct, Native American, was created for a reason and a purpose. Because anybody can be native to America. Anybody can be native to America. When you're born here, you're native to America. Just go look up the word native, which has changed. Because if you want to look at the original meaning of Native American, you have to go look at the 1828 Webster's, or any 1828 definition in any 1828 dictionary. You look at any modern dictionary, you're looking at a new modern translated term, which only means anybody who's born in America. So now Europeans and anybody born here, even if they immigrated, even if their parents immigrated here, they are now Native Americans. So Native Americans who take that and as a badge of honor for themselves don't even realize what they're doing. I am an indigenous. I'm an indigenous Aboriginal. I'm a descendant, a child of the original first people, the Paleo-Amerindians. So if I'm going to use the word native, I'm going to use the word indigenous, Aboriginal Native American. I'm more than just somebody who's born here. I'm connected to the original people who originated here, even before the Mongoloids crossed over the Bering Strait 12,000 years ago. So let me go back to my point of genocide now, and also open up the conference room. And so far, did anybody got any questions who've heard so far what I've said so far on the issue of what I've played so far? Because I know it sounds like I'm jumping around. Go ahead. This is JC. Anybody you want to identify? You don't want to identify? Go ahead.
I believe just like you do that we were here because we had family reunions. Our grandmas kept on telling us about how we were linked with the Indians and showing us pictures of all these folks with long hair, the men also, and they were dark as my father.
We are the Indians, my brother. We are the Indians. It's really sad that we have been duped. And you got to think about it. It wasn't hard for them to do it, be the fact that they took control the way they did. And by them taking control the way they did, they had the power and the resources. And by putting our people, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with everything that I'm saying, in a form of isolated chattel slavery. I say isolated chattel slavery because other nations did not practice the form of slavery that was practiced over here. And the game that they played, and they continue to play by constantly repeating and recycling these so-called African slave movies, they're perpetuating in our young people that they're African American, which is an artificial fake identity and construct. And by them doing this, they're disconnecting us from our original culture. And so it's important for us to pass this information on to our children, to our nieces, our nephews, and it's really important for the women to embrace, because the women are the master teachers to the family. They're the first ones to teach the children. But you're definitely right, brother. We are the Indians of North America. We are the original Indians of North America. And if you have any question, please ask. I'm ready to answer any question. Anybody have any questions they might want to ask? But I'm glad to hear. I appreciate you joining me here on the Black Village Community Podcast. You're always welcome to join me. I'm here every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The only times I'm not here unless I take a break off to do some research and studying, which I do from time to time. So appreciate you joining me.
Well, thank you, sir.
Okay. Other than go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we hear through migration or part of that Pangea I'm not sure the years that we got here.
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir. If you know, because even estimation is good. It's something that I can when I tell people about it in shares,
well,
I can put as much knowledge as I can into the post.
Let me first tell you the Pangea theory is a theory. There's no facts to it. Scientists talk about they talk about it as if it's a fact, but the Pangea is a theory, saying that all life started in Africa and that all humans came from Africans. That's a theory. There is no proof of that. Personally, I don't believe in the Pangea theory. I don't believe that man all started in Africa and expanded out. Now, the book I just quoted, that my wife quoted from, that quote, which is by Dr. Clyde Winters, "We Are Not Just Africans, the Black Native Americans." I can read a portion in here. I'm not sure if you caught it, that when Mount Queen was reading it, but he mentions that the Africans who came over here, when they came over here, there were already people here. Africans didn't come here and there was nobody here. There were already people here when the Africans came here. So if there were people here already when the Africans came here, what would that make those people? I mean, people are constantly want to try to bring anybody. Let me say this: people are constantly want to bring people back to Africa if you have melanated skin. But this is what I tell people: if you go to Fiji, if you go to the island of Fiji, if you went to Australia and talked to the Aborigines, if you went to the island of Samoa, if you went to the Dominican Republic and told them people they were African, they would tell you anybody. It would tell them they were crazy. If you went to Japan and told the Japanese they were African, and went to China and told the Chinese they were African, they're going to tell you that you're crazy. Well, no, we're not African. And I'm going to tell you why. Because culture supersedes science. I'm going to say it again. Culture supersedes science. And why do I say that? Because you're not going to go to any culture and make them change because science says so. And we got to also realize who's controlling science. White people, who can't really be trusted. So you have to question even the science that's coming out. Do you feel me, my brother? Because when it comes to Pangea... I
don't even believe it.
Yeah, because when it comes to Pangea, my question is this. If you want to say everybody came out of Africa, so you're saying all the snakes came out of Africa, all the lions came out of Africa, all the insects and all the bugs and all the birds came out of Africa. You mean to tell me plant life, some type of way, plant life found its way out of Africa and spread across the planet? No! Plants, insects, and bugs are native to their locality. You got plants that can't grow in certain places. You got plants that can't grow in Africa, plants in Africa that can't grow in other places. You got insects and bugs that cannot survive in other places. Why? Because animals, plants are native to their locality. So I don't believe in Pangea. No. Either. I don't believe in the Pangea.
I know that white people did not come from us.
No.
I know that white people are different than we are.
I don't know.
They came from something else.
Yeah, I don't know where white people came from. To be honest with you, when you come to the historical scene, they ain't been around very long. 1500 years ago, they weren't even on the historical record. So I don't know where they came from, but they're here. But since they're here,
animal stuff.
Yeah. Since they're here and we have to deal with them, and they've conquered and they've done what they've done, what's important for us as a people is to reclaim our identity. Reclaim our identity. Stop calling ourselves African Americans, a name that's an artificial false construct. We got to stop calling ourselves Black Americans. We got to call ourselves who we are. If you're Cherokee and your mama and your grandmama and your great grandmother passed that information on that you're Cherokee or Choctaw, Chickasaw, or Yamasee or Ojibwa, that we have to reclaim our identities.
Or Creek Indians in that fold?
Of course, yes. Creek Indians, yes. The Cree, the Creek, the Crow Indian,
yes, sir.
Blackfoot, yes. A good book. I would encourage.
That's what we are.
Yeah. Oh, you're Creek, sir.
Yes, sir.
You're Creek Indian?
In the family reunion, I found out about the Creek.
Yeah, I mean, you know what?
From Alabama area.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We must reclaim our identities. We must teach it to our children. Tell our children, no, you're not no African American. You know, I got 7 sons.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Last question. I didn't want to hog up the whole line. I went to a seminar on rightful status, and I wondered, did it have anything to do with dropping the African American logo, the status that you can get from the government that takes you outside of that box?
Yeah, there's a lot of legality in this when it comes to dropping the African American. There's a couple of things that you can do. I mean, it depends on what level and how far you want to take it to being sovereign or not being sovereign. If you want to be sovereign, you can be sovereign. If you don't want to be sovereign, that's your choice. Sovereign is a whole nother category. But me, what I'm focused on right now, to me, is taking steps at a time. You know, it took steps for us to get to where we are. It wasn't overnight. It was a process. It was years of process to get to where we are today. As far as losing our identity, as far as our grandparents and great-grandparents not passing on a whole lot of information to us. So it's going to take a process for us to regain our identity. So what I'm sharing and what I'm encouraging people to do is to do your research. Do a research on your family tree. Reclaim your identity by claiming who you are. Start with that first before you take any legal steps of any legality, because that's a whole nother ball game when it comes to dealing with the legal system. And I'm not even on that level right now with the legal system. I've known people who are doing it, but me myself right now, I'm all about education. That's what I'm all about. I'm all about educating my children, educating my friends, educating my family about reclaiming our identity. That means changing your ID, taking African American off your ID, take an African American off any documents, and put who you are. You are an indigenous Native American. Don't just say Native American, indigenous Native American. Because I'm not a Mongoloid. A Mongoloid is a regular Native American. I'm an indigenous Aboriginal Native American. And so that's what I promote. You feel me? I hope I answered your question. So,
yeah, you did.
Okay.
I appreciate your time, because I know how it is when you get on the air.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I appreciate you calling in. I appreciate you joining me. And so it's all gravy. It's all gravy. I really appreciate you joining me. So on that note, I am going to continue the subject matter here, which is titled, podcast topic, the European invasion and the transatlantic myth. Again, as I like to say,
our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
And that's the subtitle of the show. Plymouth Rock landed on us. And so I'm going to continue with some reading from some articles. And I was pointing out, like I say, the different forms of genocide. Most people have been given a false definition of genocide. Go look up Raphael Lemkin, his name. He's the one who coined the term in the early 19th century. He is a Jew. He coined the term genocide. He never coined the term genocide to mean that a person is physically killed. The actual true definition, the original definition of genocide is to be assimilated, to be assimilated to your original identity, your original comprehension, your original foresight of yourself, your perception of yourself is totally altered. That's what genocide means. It means to change your scenery, change your culture, to change who you are, change the way you live. You don't talk the way you used to talk no more. Your language is gone. Your identity is gone. Your culture is gone. Everything is gone. You're somebody else. You're being reprogrammed. That's the true definition of genocide. So, on that note, I want to continue to read here, talking about the different forms of genocide. Okay, now, the second type of genocide, okay, that went on here in Turtle Island with the invasion of Europeans colonizing here, back during the 15th and 16th century. We got to also realize when the white men came here, because the first people to colonize here were the Spanish. That was Hernando de Soto, who had it from 1530 all the way until when the Europeans were brought in 1586 to 1587, and then you had the first migration of Europeans who came over here in 1612, and that didn't work out. They died from starvation and all that other stuff, and then they came back in 1620, and this is where you got the wonderful story of the Mayflower and the Pilgrims who got off the Mayflower and on Plymouth Rock and met the indigenous people in New England and the Massachusetts Indians and so forth. So the second type of invasion, okay, was due to the spoils of war. Okay, because the first type of invasion, we got to remember, the first type of European invasion came with what? Diplomacy, contact, biological warfare. That was purposely done. That was not an accident. I read to you guys I already read the 18th century war that the British had with the French, and that Mr. Jeffries was talking about killing the Indians with germ warfare, with smallpox. So that encounter in 1620, where the Massachusetts Indians got decimated by disease in 1620 due to the Mayflower contact, that was purposely done. That was no accident. How do I know that? I just gave you an example of a British officer talking to his commanding officer about doing disease of smallpox on the Canadian Indians in Canada. So there you go right there. So number one, biological warfare with the falsified contact of diplomacy. The second type of war, genocide warfare they did was captives of war, which was physical bondage through perpetual and permanent enslavement. Yes, I know time is ticking down, so if I go a little bit over, it's okay, and I'm going to do a part 2 to this, okay? The second genocide of warfare was captives of war, which was physical bondage through perpetual and permanent enslavement, which was done through their system of archaic, corrupt laws and their law enforcers, like slave patrols and slave hunters, which evolved into what we got now, which is the modern police force. Come on now, it ain't stopped. Their slave watchers are still here. They just wear black and white now. So that's their second. How's that genocide? How was that? You might say, well, that's just like I done genocide. Remember, I tell you what genocide is: assimilation. When you go to jail, you're living their way. You get up when they tell you to get up, you wear what they say you to wear, you eat what they say to eat, you act how they say to act. So when you're in prison, when you're in jail, when you're a captive, that's what it is. What is slavery? Same thing. Tell you when to get up, when to eat, when to wipe you behind, what your name is, who you are. Same thing with prison. Prison is just modern day slavery. So the second genocide was slavery. The third type of genocidal war, their warfare, was the reconditioned form of mental slavery, which is reinforced by the second, with one exception: the indoctrination and practice of reprogramming and brainwashing through the means of enslavement for the purpose of what? Assimilation, basically chattel slavery. That was the second form of warfare and genocide. Chattel slavery, taking away your identity, reprogramming. You feel me? Again, the example is limited to, but is the first, this third example is connected to the second example, which is enslavement. But it's not limited to enslavement because it's a whole nother form: chattel slavery, assimilation. To assimilate a person and to force them into a new way of living, removing their way and culture without choice or their will in the matter. This is what was done to our people. This is the calling yourself African American, evolving from being called Negroes, colored, black, Afro American, now African American. That's chattel slavery. That was the third form of genocide. Because now you're not what your ancestors were. We don't know our language. See, language is culture. assimilating into a European mindset. Now you speak English, you don't speak your original language no more, you don't know your language. That, like I said, that's genocide. The fourth type of warfare, which was done to our people, and the final one, which was the nail in the coffin, again, the mental genocide and the indoctrination of chattel slavery. What's the indoctrination? Now your mother recycles it, your father recycles it. They don't have to do it no more. We do it to ourselves. We recycle this lost identity. We're not looking for ourselves. We're not looking for our culture. We're not looking for our language. We don't care no more. That was the fourth type of psychological indoctrination, where all we do is reprocess the thing over and over. Now our children do it. They don't care. They don't know the language. They don't know Cherokee. They don't know Choctaw. They don't know nothing about it. That was the fourth thing that was done to us. You feel me? Along with the paper genocide. That's a part of it as well. Paper genocide that was done to our grandparents, our great-grandparents, which only deepened the amnesia into a loss of identity. Europeans did this to our indigenous ancestors. European political and economic, it was all about their political and economic future and goals and agenda to establish a permanent and total control over all material and natural resources, which included and not limited to the people as capital people. That's what the European invasion was all about. Now you might say, all right, you called the podcast the European invasion and the transatlantic slave myth. Yes, because after doing all this to a people, what was there really a need to bring Africans over here by the so-called hundreds of thousands? Huh? Now the question is, did they bring Africans over here at all? Yes, they brought some Africans over here, but they didn't bring the Africans over here that everybody think they came over here. They didn't know millions of Africans come to North America. People need to wake up from that idiotic idea. Matter of fact, science, at least teachers are telling the truth on that now. You can go to www.slavevoyages.org and get the update on how many Africans came to North America. And I'm going to tell you, people, less than 5% of the total that was taken. They claim that 12 million Africans came from Africa. But they tell you that 48% went to Brazil. The other 42% went to the European colonies, not North America, but England, France, and all the so-called West Indies, which included little small islands. But only less than 5% came to North America. Less than 5% of the total came to North America. And what is that total? 305,325. And I want you to know, I can't even trust that so-called 305,000 were all Africans. Why? Because if you look at and you do your research, the way they was checkerboard and shuffling the people around, if you know the story of the Trail of Tears, if you know the story of how they were relocating our people all over the place, taking the Cherokee Indians from Mississippi, shipping them to Carolina, taking the Carolina Indians or the Delaware Indians from you will see it's hard to even accept the fact that if that 305,000 did not entail our people who were just brought right back over here after being shipped right out. Also, I got something I want to share also with with the people, that me and my queen did some research. We did some research on, prime example, I wanted to know how many slaves were in South Carolina in 1790. I wanted to know how many slaves were in Virginia in 1790. And guess what I found out? I got the number right here. In Virginia in 1790 in Virginia, just Virginia, 292,627 slaves. I ain't talking about no white ones either. These are all Negro. In South Carolina in the same year of 1790, 107,009 slaves. Now, if you add that number up, 292 in Virginia and 170 107 in South Carolina. That's over 300,000 right there, slaves. According to the new update of actually how many Africans that were brought here from 1626 to 1787 is only 305,000 Africans who were so-called shipped here. But you got, just in 2 states in 1790, just 2 states, you got over 300,000 slaves. We ain't factored in North Carolina. We ain't factored in Philadelphia. We ain't factored in Massachusetts, Delaware, New York, New Jersey. We ain't factored in the South, Louisiana, Mississippi. I'm showing you there were over 300,000 slaves just in 2 states in 1790. So, if you bring 305,000 Africans here, how can they turn into millions of black Americans in 1790? Because I want you to know, if I was to tell you how many slaves was in New Jersey, New York, Mississippi, Louisiana, New Orleans, Georgia, Alabama, Philadelphia, if I told you how many slaves in 1790, because I just told you there were over 292 slaves in Virginia, over 107 slaves in South Carolina, just 2 states in 1790. Let's factor it in the other states. That's hundreds of thousands of slaves, if not millions. Whoa. Somebody got their numbers wrong. Somebody got their numbers wrong. So unless they're lying about the fact there's only 305,000 Africans coming to North America from 1626 to last shipment of 1787. Only 305,325 Africans. That's it. No more, no less. I want down the number. How many Native Americans was enslaved in North America at that time? How many? I'm gonna tell you right now. From 1492 to 1715, there was 5 million. By the time we were in the 18th century, 20 million indigenous people were enslaved. 20 million. 20 million people. Now, the number of how many so-called black Americans were enslaved by 1790 from all the states in the Union in 1790, 12 million black folks was enslaved in America from all the states, from Mississippi to Georgia, from Texas to Delaware, from Maine to Missouri, didn't matter. All the 12 million black folks was enslaved. So I tell you people, how can you get 12 million from 305,000 from 1687? Because from 1626, by 1687, we only had 305,000 Africans. Where you gonna meet them? Who you mating them with? Because I want you to know, 80 to 90% of the male cargo was male, it was men. So who you gonna make those men to? I'm gonna tell you, indigenous black Indian women who were on the plantation. Because who had the power of agriculture in the indigenous family? The women. The women were the ones who grew the corn. The women were the ones who planted the squash. The women were the ones who harvested the beans. The 3 sisters that the indigenous people depended on, which was maize, which is corn, squash, and beans. So I want you to know they grew more than that. But then was the main staple, because they can grow those things throughout the year. It was the women who had the power and the knowledge of agriculture. The men did not do that. The men did not do that. The men were the ones who, hunted, built teepees, and, they built things. They were the warriors. They protected the family. They hunted. They would go out on hunts. But it was the women who grew the vegetables, the fruit. It was the women who did the cooking. It was the women who took care of the children. It was the women who were the spiritualists. It was the women who taught the values and taught the system of how things should be in the community, the togetherness. It was the women who who made the skins, and it was the women who did all the hard work, and it was those women who were on the plantation. Now, I wish I'm gonna have to conclude this to next week because I wanted to read from a book called Harper's Encyclopedia. It's an 30-something book. It's encyclopedia from the 1830s, and when you read what the indigenous people did, I mean, I read in Harper's Encyclopedia where it said the indigenous women, they did all the agriculture, they did all the hard work in the tribal communities. They did all the cooking, they did all the growing all the fruits and vegetables. They took care of the children. They made the men's weapons. They also helped with making the canoes. The women made they're the ones who made the peace pipes. The women made all the peace pipes because according to indigenous tradition, it was the white calf woman who gave the peace pipe to the people through the women. So my point being, it was I want to read some excerpts because there's some other things in Harper's Encyclopedia that verify some things, and I don't want to say nothing right now. I like to read it and then surprise everybody, and when you read it, it's going to blow your mind. You're going to be like, what? So I'm going to conclude this to next week, and I will be back and be black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village, as I always do every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, West Coast. You feel me? I'm out here in the West Coast, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village. This is JC, aka Afro Black, your soldier of consciousness, dropping nothing but indigenous truth here for the conscious community. So on that note, before I go, anybody got anything they want to contribute, they might want to say before we continue this? And you know what, before we go, I must play this right quick. It's Lord Jamar of the rap group Brand Nubians. I mean, I just love to hear this brother say this right here.
And in order to make us not rebel crazily, they made us think we was from somewhere else. We was already here. That we are the fucking Indians. We are the fucking Indians that they found here.
White Americans created the myth that the Native Americans were descendants of Mongolic people from East Asia.
There you go. I just had to play that. We got to remember who we are. We got to reclaim who we are. We got to stop calling ourselves something that we're not. It doesn't make sense to call yourself an African American. You're not born in Africa. You're born in America. And if, you know, you got people out there say, well, you know, that doesn't take away from the fact that you got African blood. But, you know, as a friend of mine said, how you going to call yourself African? You don't speak African. You don't know any African languages. You don't have an African accent. You don't wear African clothes. You don't practice African cultures and customs. You don't know any African holidays. You got no African anything in your house. You don't have any African friends. You don't have any African family. So how the hell you going to call yourself an African? At least Barack Obama is a true house Negro African American, because his daddy is a Kenyan and his mama is a white woman from Hawaii. So he's a true house nigga out African American. But black people who have roots in America going all the way back to slavery, we got to realize that the original people who were here did not die off. I'll put it down here next week, which is an excerpt from Christopher Columbus's own diaries, talking about the Native American people not dying from disease. And so I wanted to point that out. You got a lot of people who will say, well, yeah, they die, but you got to go read the information, okay? Because just like over here, when people get sick, some get sick real sick, some people don't. Some people's immune system adapt and protects them. And Christopher Columbus made this known to Isabella, because Queen Isabella was concerned that the Indian people would die in the transport, because he had his mind made up. He was going to take him some slaves back because he owed the queen money because she paid for his expedition. The Queen Isabella of Spain, she's the one who funded Columbus's expedition. And so he had to bring something back as collateral. He couldn't find gold because the little small islands, like the Canary Islands, Virgin Islands, Haitian Islands, Cuban Islands, which these were the islands that Columbus attacked and enslaved those people. He couldn't find gold. And so he took the people as so-called AKA booty, or as ransom for the collateral for the Queen Isabella, so he wouldn't lose his head because he didn't have no money to pay her back. You know, he promised to bring gold, silver back, and he didn't find any. So those people did not die from disease in contact. He took the first people he took back. I think he took 20 people back to Spain. His second expedition. His second exploration, which I believe was in 1496, he took 500 people off of a number of islands and took them to Spain. His second expedition, he had more ships though to do so. His first expedition, he only had 2 ships and 1 ship crashed, so he only was able to bring back 20 people, and only 7 people survived. But my point being is that people need to realize that the white man has a forked tongue. When our indigenous ancestors said the white man has a forked tongue, that is true. The white man still has a forked tongue. He will tell you the truth on one side and curve the truth on the other, or tell you a lie and then tell you an extra lie on top of that. So you must question everything that the white man says. History, science, doesn't matter what it is. Just don't take things for verbatim and trust the white man. Doesn't mean that he tell all lies, but he definitely bends, curves, and will transform the truth. And so you must stop being a slave. People got to wake up. But I will conclude this. I will be back, and I will definitely be black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut next Delicious Black Sunday. And if anybody got anything they want to conclude before we head up out of here, I'd be very much appreciated. Anybody want any bye-bye notes or anything? Anybody got anything they want to say before we go? Anybody want to say comment on the show or comment on the information? Or, you know, we ain't got to just run. We can verberate a little bit. Anybody got anything they want to say about what I was talking about? Go ahead.
It was a great show.
I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy.
I wanted to touch on.
Go ahead.
I wanted to touch on. You made me think about something. They always try to make it sound like the southern states were the only slaves. That means the whole country was, if that census count.
Yeah,
about slaves, that means that New York had them, Maryland had them.
Exactly. And actually, and when they talk about history, they only want to talk about the 13 colonies. Well, we got to realize, even though all 13 colonies in the early 18th century is all we had in the beginning, okay, they were still expanding and taking land from our ancestors. So, by the early 1900s, we had more than 13 colonies, and it expanded further out. And so, like you say, all 13 of those colonies had slaves. All 13 of those colonies have slaves, and as they expanded out and took more from our people and created more states, those states also had slaves. And so we also got to be mindful of what Walter Plecker did. Dr. Walter Plecker was a white man, and he was the first and the head of the vital statistics in the early 1900s. He was changing birth, marriage, and driver's license records. Anybody who had a driver's license record, anybody who had a birth certificate, a social security card, anything with your name and your identity on it, this white devil was changing. And if it said Cherokee or Cree, if it said Black Indian, if it said Yamasee, if it said Ojibwa, he changed it and put Negro or African on it. So we have to realize the paper genocide these devils have done and are still doing to this day. They haven't changed their game. If you go into an office and you don't tell that doctor or that psychiatrist or that educator, whoever, you don't tell that state or that federal person, excuse me, I am not an African American. Would you please put my true identity on? They'll do it because they did it to my children. I had to go in and go into the school board and have to look, change that. We're not no African Americans. So we have to realize the paper genocide they still doing. Anything else anybody want to contribute? before we head up out of here? Brother Currington, are you there? I see you there, my brother. Got anything you want to say before we go? Hey, Brother Currington, I see that 916 number sitting right there. You want anything you want to say before you head up out of here, Brother Currington?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
You good? You enjoy what
you're... It was a good program, though.
Okay, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, my brother. But we will be back next week. I will conclude this show next week, which is the invasion, the European invasion, and the transatlantic myth. And I would also, when I can conclude this podcast subject, I will definitely make sure I bring out the fact that there isn't any slave ships. People are constantly wanting to believe, black folks want to hold on to this transatlantic myth, but there's not one slave ship nowhere around. I did the research. You got some people, you got these white folks running around talking about they found some ship in the ocean off the coast of Africa. But see, we don't live in Africa. I live off the coast in America. I'm here. I'm in America. Show me a ship off the coast of America. Somebody dig up some. Ain't no ships, you know. You can find drawings. You can find people putting together their own scenery, you know, they put together their own scenery. But you can't find a picture, a painting, or just a piece of a real ship from the 18th or the 17th century. Ain't around. Why? Because they don't exist. So, folks need to wake up. Just simple questions we need to raise, and we can get simple answers with simple questions. But it's not as complex as people want to make it to be. So, on that note, I will be back. I will definitely be black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village. And before I go, I must play this too. I got to play this.
This means, in the case of an American Negro, it comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. That the Indians were you.
The Indians were us. So I'm going to leave it on that note. I will be back. I will be black next delicious Black Sunday, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut. You can always join me here every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can chime in. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time to join me and share in on a conscious discussion. 855-445-9340, 857-232-0155, and chime in with the conference code 947595. And so on that note, I'm going to end my show, and I got to go. See ya.
No matter where you go, in every country we in there. Most of us did not come on slave ships, we've been here. Indian just means amalgamated more. The U.S. tried to wipe us out in 3 Seminole wars. For each Aboriginal, 7 troops died. 90% of Indians were reclassified as Negroes. We fought European foes. Africa's great, but we don't look under our nose. Or now here's the Old Man River, or the Massey Sequel, knock out the Mississippi. We're the Yamasi people and others here like the Washita, the Chocos in Colombia, Darienes in Panama, the Garifunas and more. We're prisoners of war. Our titles, nationalities, and birthrights ignored. We got a huge missing gap in our past and been divided into race or some type of caste. Everyone else has a language, where's mine? Cause ours is long gone like your grandpa's hairline. Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people.
raw.